Hey everybody, it's Innovision, and I'm back with the video we've all been waiting for. In today's video, I'll be sharing an alternate approach for how to dual boot Windows and SteamOS on any gaming PC, including your gaming handhelds, laptops, and desktops. What's epic about this approach is it allows you to add SteamOS to your existing Windows installation. Several of these gaming handhelds ship with Windows already installed. It gets you to where you can dual boot in a much shorter amount of time. Stick around, because you don't want to miss any of it. If you're enjoying my how-to guides and handheld related content, be sure to like the video and subscribe. That way you get that notification as soon as a new video comes out. As we get started, I'd like to go over some of the pros and cons of each of the dual boot methods. As many of you all know, we have a dual boot guide on the channel, but it takes the perspective that you have SteamOS already installed and you're wanting to add Windows. The biggest advantage to the existing method that we've already discussed on the channel is that you have access to a rich body of open source software that was custom tailored for the Steam Deck that takes the perspective that SteamOS was already installed on your device and you're adding Windows next. So while the approach we're going to discuss here today takes the alternate perspective that Windows is already installed and we're adding SteamOS, that means we're going to lose the ability to use some of those open source software repositories. But in my mind, that's really not that big of a con, and here's why. It allows you to install SteamOS in like 15 minutes. It's a huge time saver, but the other really big advantage that we can't miss out on here, we're going to create our own EFI partitions so that SteamOS doesn't have to share its EFI partition with Windows. That means that you're better shielded from Windows updates that might destroy your dual boot setup. And this is huge because now I don't have to bust out my SteamOS recovery media ever so often when I get one of these giant Windows updates. For the remainder of this video, I'll be using the Legion Go 2 as my hardware testbed, but I want to be clear that this method works on all gaming PCs and gaming handhelds that support both Windows and SteamOS. For example, I built my own Steam box and I already have it dual booting using this method. And just to be clear, we're not responsible for any damage or loss of data that you're going to experience while doing this installation. I highly recommend you back up any important or sensitive files. But now it's time for the fun part. Let's get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is create our SteamOS recovery media. If we just navigate to the Steam support page for the SteamOS installation and repair, you'll see a list of supported devices. And so we've got Steam Deck, Legion Go S, Legion Go, the ROG Ally devices, and some other AMD powered handhelds. What you'll notice is some devices are not on this list, like the Legion Go 2 or the Xbox Ally. And so if your device is on this list of supported devices, you'll just go over here and click download SteamOS image. And when you click on this, it's going to take you to a page here where you're going to accept the license, and then you'll click download. I'm using the Legion Go 2, so I won't be able to use this recovery image. The other thing you'll do in addition to downloading the recovery image is download either the Rufus utility or Balena Etcher. Now Valve recommends using Rufus under Windows. I've actually had mixed results. It really depends on the quality of my USB storage media. I've had better results using Rufus on some USB storage devices, whereas on other devices I've had a better experience using Balena Etcher. So I'd recommend start out with Rufus. If you run into problems, then use Balena Etcher. I'm going to go ahead and download an alternate image, and we're going to use the 3.8 main Steam Deck Holo image. These are disk images that are created regularly through their automation of their code stack. And so when I go to this page, I just order it by the date, and I try to find the first directory that has the SteamOS repair image. I don't see it here, so see, they're already starting to test SteamOS 3.9, which is really cool. So on October 27th, they created a Steam Deck OOBE repair main. Typically, OOBE stands for out of box experience. This is likely the disk image that's used for the Legion Go S devices if you were to download it from Lenovo. So we're going to download this .zip file. And while that's downloading, let's go ahead and visit Valve's support page and download the Rufus utility. And so it's just confirming we're going to an external site. That's fine. And I'm just going to grab this standard one right here. Our SteamOS recovery image is almost done downloading. I'll go ahead and open Explorer here. All right, so it's done downloading. Let's go ahead and extract our disk image. I'm just placing it in my downloads folder. Okay, now that we've downloaded our Steam recovery image, we've extracted it to our downloads folder. Now's a good time to plug in our USB storage device. Once it's plugged in, let's go ahead and click on Rufus. Once you've clicked on Rufus, you'll want to pick the drive that corresponds to your USB drive. So I know mine's a 128 gig USB 3. Once it's plugged in and it shows up here in Rufus, you're going to click the select button, and we're going to pick our Steam Deck OOBE repair image main. That all looks good. We're going to leave everything with the default settings and then click start. And then it's saying, hey, it's going to erase everything that's on the disk. That's perfectly okay. I'm going to click OK. And saying, hey, there's multiple partitions. That's fine. I want to delete everything. And now it's just going to write out the disk image to our USB storage media. Depending on the speed of your USB storage drive and the speed of your computer, this could take a few minutes or up to a half hour. Just depends. All right, it's just about finished here. And it's done. We can click close, and then you click safely remove your USB storage media. And now we're all set with our USB recovery media. So the first thing we're going to want to do before we shrink our Windows partition, we're going to want to boot into our BIOS by holding the volume up key, tapping the power button, and leaving your finger on volume plus. And we're going to be greeted with an options menu here. Okay, so here we are. We're going to enter BIOS setup. And so I'm going to show you how my BIOS is set up right now. I'm going to go to more settings. And so under my display settings, I like to use 6 gigs VRAM buffer. For SteamOS, they recommend actually setting this to auto, but I don't want to keep switching it whenever I go between Windows and SteamOS, so I'm happy with 6. I'm finding it's plenty for everything. Under security, now this is very important here. You need to disable secure boot. And so secure boot is right here under security. And when you click on it, make sure it's disabled. If you do disable it and you already have Windows installed, the very next time you boot into Windows, it's going to ask you to reset your PIN. And that's because you changed the security settings on your device. And then I'm going to click exit saving changes. Alright, so now that we've got our BIOS properly configured and we're able to log back into Windows, the very next thing we're going to want to do is free up some space so that we have room to install SteamOS. In order to do that, we're going to type in computer management, and it should auto-populate it here. We're going to click into that, and then we're going to go under disk management. I upgraded my device to a 4 terabyte solid state drive, and I'll be uploading a video on the channel showing you how to upgrade your storage as well, so keep an eye out for that. But one thing you'll notice is that my biggest volume on my 4 terabyte drive, which shows up as 3700 gigs, is where Windows is installed, and then we have a partition after it. This is the recovery partition, so you can move this recovery partition or you can delete it, but this recovery partition is something that Lenovo's recovery media creates and it uses for reinstalling Windows. Technically you don't need this, and so I'm going to right click on the biggest volume here and go to the option shrink volume, and so it's querying the disk and determining the amount of free space we have. And so what I'm going to do here is select SteamOS to have, let's say, 3300 gigabytes, and the unit here is actually megabytes. So I'm going to click shrink here and just scope it out. So I'm kind of aiming for like 500 or 600. So we've got what, 469. So I want to keep a little bit more space than that for Windows. So if you find that you didn't like the amount that you created, you can actually go ahead and click extend volume here and it'll grow it back to the maximum amount. And then let's try that again. So I'm going to shrink volume. You can get down to the exact megabyte. Here I'm just kind of going for a roundabout number. So I'm just going to pick 32 here and shrink it. And then, okay, so we got 566 available space in Windows. This is perfect. This will give me the ability to install firmware updates, update my Legion Go controllers, and still test some games in Game Pass and test things in Windows. But typically I'm finding I spend more time under SteamOS, so I'd rather have more space in SteamOS. And so that looks good. And so now I'm going to exit here. That's all set. And I'm going to shut down. And then we're going to boot off of the SteamOS recovery media. Now we need to boot off of our SteamOS recovery media, and we'll do so by holding the volume plus and tapping the power button and leaving our finger pressing the volume plus button. All right, and we'll go under BIOS setup, and you just want to move your USB device to the top of the list. I already have it set up that way here, but traditionally what you'll see is Windows is the first boot option, so you'll need to press this up arrow until your USB device is at the topmost option. And then you'll click exit. And I didn't change anything here, so it didn't ask me to save, but if you did change the settings, it's going to give you the option to save and exit. Make sure you pick save and exit. And so you can see we're booting off of our SteamOS recovery media right now. And this takes about a minute to boot up here. All right, we're in our SteamOS recovery environment. All right, so we're in our recovery environment. And before we do anything, we need to go ahead and modify our partition layout. So we're gonna go into System and then go into KDE Partition Manager. And so you can see here we've got 3 terabytes of free space, and we've got 2 gigs allocated by the Windows recovery. And so you can actually move this if you want to keep it. The whole idea here is we want all the unallocated space to be the last bit of space on the disk. And so if you choose to keep your Windows recovery partition, so you would go to resize and move, and then free space before would be this amount. So we're going to want to copy and paste the free space before and make it the free space after. And then you would click OK. And so that would move the Windows recovery or restore point to there. And so we're going to click Apply. And this takes just a few seconds. And now it's all set. And so now we've got our 3 terabytes of unallocated space. And so we can go ahead and exit this. And the next thing we're going to want to do, we can't go ahead and click this wipe device and install SteamOS. This will completely delete everything on your hard drive and reinitialize it. So we're going to use a custom install script. So I'm going to go into my terminal here, my console. So this is a very long URL. I'm going to add this to the description of the video, and I'll see if I can make a short link, and if I am able to make one, I'll post it in the video like as text that you'll see on the screen here. But what we're going to type is wget https://raw.githubusercontent.com sorry Alexander steam-os-custom install /refs/heads/main/steam-os custom install.sh. And so this is a custom install script made by Alexander, and Alexander is a subscriber of our community. At the time SteamOS was starting to become available for the original Legion Go and the ROG Ally, independent of the work I was doing, he developed a modified version of the SteamOS script to be able to provide you the ability to install SteamOS after the Windows has been installed. In my previous dual boot guide, I show you how to install it with SteamOS being installed first. And there's several benefits for SteamOS being installed first. Simpler in terms of the process, it's simpler, but it's a lot more manual. But more importantly, there's several existing tools and software that are made for Steam Deck, and those tools expect that SteamOS is installed first and Windows is second. And so if you choose to do this, you'll lose compatibility with some of those softwares. Independent of Alexander's work, I actually made a script that wasn't as beautiful as the one he put together here, just as a proof of concept to show that we could install Windows first and then SteamOS. But what I like about Alexander's script is it looks and behaves just like the one that ships with SteamOS, except it gives you a little UI where you can plug in the indices of your partition layout, and you'll see that in just a second. Let's go ahead and grab this file by hitting enter here, and I want to move it or copy it to the desktop. So I'm going to type in cp SteamOS custom install.sh, and we're going to copy it to the desktop, and I'm going to give it the exact same name here. And now we are going to move to the desktop here. We'll type in cd/desktop. And we need to make this script an executable. So we'll do chmod, change mode, a plus x, and the name of the script again. And so now, if we do ls here, we can see the script is this blue text just like the other icons on the desktop, meaning that's an executable. So we'll type in sudo // SteamOS custom install.sh. It's very similar to the one that ships with SteamOS recovery media. We want to go ahead and click proceed here. It's giving us the warning. He added this warning about having enough free space. So we click proceed. If you select no, we have to provide manual partition indices. If you select yes here, it's going to erase your disk and behave just like the normal one that ships with the recovery media. So it's very important we click no here. And so it's asking the first index for the partition that's going to be the ESP partition. And so it's good to just verify here with the KDE partition manager. We can count our partitions. So the first one is the EFI partition that Windows uses. Then we've got some data that Windows is using. We've got the Windows installation, and then we've got our Windows recovery volume. And so let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fifth one will be our ESP partition that SteamOS needs. And so that's perfect. So we're just going to click OK here. But if it wasn't going to be the fifth one, you'd have to change it to match the index that you're using. And so each one's just going to be counting up. EFI A is going to be number 6. EFI B is going to be number 7. Root FS A is going to be 8. We'll click OK. Root FS B is going to be partition 9. OK. var A is going to be 10. var B is going to be 11. And our home partition is going to be 12. So click OK. And it's starting to create the partitions that we need. And so we're just going to let it run here. Now it's starting to copy the SteamOS payloads. All is said and done. It finished copying all the SteamOS related files, and now we can click proceed. And one thing I'm watching here is once we stop seeing the kernel messages here, I'm going to unplug my recovery media so it's no longer a boot option. There we go. Perfect time to unplug it right there. And so now we're waiting for it to boot. I believe it should boot into SteamOS directly because the topmost boot option at this point. But if not, we'll have to go in the BIOS and configure it. And there we go. We're in SteamOS. And so now you would just onboard and log into your device like you would normally. And so it's going to download and install any updates. And once it reboots, you're able to log into your Steam account using your Steam Guard. Alright, and so at this point you can use your Steam Guard to log in. Alright, so one thing I want to show everyone, though we booted off of a recovery media that's 3.8, it downloaded 3.7. And let's check our TDP settings. So all the TDP settings are already built into this version of SteamOS, which is awesome. So I just want to go ahead and configure a couple of things here. So I like to see the performance metrics here. And if you have the custom TDP setting, you can limit your TDP to whatever you want. I'm going to actually move it to balance. I find balance performance is really cool. So that's another one. So we've got low, balance, balanced performance and performance, and then custom. And so I really like this one. I've been using it a lot for gaming. Another thing I like to do is make sure that frame limit is disabled when I'm plugged in. Variable refresh rate is enabled, and I like to manually set my GPU clock. I find for CPU bound games like Elden Ring and NBA 2K26, setting it between 1300 and 1600 is like the sweet spot. But another thing we're going to want to do here is go into desktop mode and download Decky Loader plugins. We want the Legion Go remapper so we can control our RGB lighting. So once you're in desktop mode, the first thing you want to do is go to System and then Console, and we need to provide a password for our Steam Deck user. And so we're going to type in PASSWD and hit enter, and then you'll type your password in twice. Now that our password's updated successfully, we're going to want to get on Firefox. Once we click on Firefox, it's going to ask us to download it here. So let's go ahead and install it from the FlatHub. Alright, before I get into Firefox real quick, I want to go ahead and download Proton. So I like Proton Plus. It allows me to manage different versions of Proton, and I like to use Proton GE latest for some games. Alright, so let's go ahead and run it real quick so I can show you. So I get this one right here, Proton GE latest. I'm just going to download it. Alright, that is handled. I'm going to close out all these windows here. We can leave the console open, but let's go ahead and open Firefox, and we want to download the installer for Decky Loader. Since we're on SteamOS 3.7, we're going to be able to just install the stable version of the Decky Loader plugin manager. So we'll click download here, and when we run the installer, it will ask us if we want stable or pre-release. And so here it's asking us for our password. Alright, and so yeah, since we're on 3.7, we can just run with the release version versus the pre-release. So I'm going to select that option. I'm going to click OK, and it is done. And so the next thing we want to do is download Legion Go remapper. So we clicked on the GitHub repo page by Aaron Lee, and we're going to scroll down to the quick install step, which is right here. And we're going to copy this. We're going to paste it in our terminal. It's going to ask for our password. And while that's running, okay, so it's done. We can technically reboot now, but before that, I want to go ahead and download lossless scaling too. So I'm searching lossless scaling Decky. I'm going to go to the first repo that pops up and download the latest release here. And I'm going to install that later. I'm just downloading it so it's here. And so now we're all set. We can type in reboot in our console. And our Super Steam Deck Legion Go is about to reboot. Alright, we're in. So one thing I want to call out here is brightness controls do not work, which is a shame. So that's something that they're probably going to fix here pretty soon. So what I want to show you is we should go into settings here, and then under display, disable adaptive brightness here, and see it still doesn't work. So I don't want to use the SteamOS adaptive brightness. I want to actually use the one that's provided by the Legion Go remapper. And so I'm going to go into Legion Go remapper. I'm going to enable adaptive brightness, and let's go ahead and enable our RGB controls here. For some reason, I really like the spiral one with the Legion Go 2 controllers. I like the speed to be about 60 and the brightness to be about 30. That's one of my favorite settings here. And so at this point, your device is all set and perfectly usable. But if you want to install lossless scaling, we'll go into the plugin manager, enable developer mode, and let's go ahead and install the one we just downloaded. And I want to go ahead and search for lossless here. Go ahead and install that. While that's installing, let's go ahead and enable the last bit we need here. We need to install the lossless scaling Vulkan wrapper. Alright, that looks all set. And since we're on an OLED display, we can go ahead and enable HDR mode here. And it looks like we're ready to use this as well. Oh, almost ready to use it. So it's still downloading. Alright, and it's all set. Alright, so the last thing I want to show you is how to switch between Windows and SteamOS. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down here. In my other dual boot guide, we use the refned bootloader menu, which can technically work here. I've had some issues with using the current versions out of the box. We'd have to use the kind of raw refn manager versus the ones that have been custom tailored for SteamOS, because the current ones that are out there make some assumptions that SteamOS is the first OS that's actually installed on your device, and it's been unstable, and I don't recommend using it. I actually, at this point, in general, the way I've been using my devices lately, I'm actually not using the boot manager at all. I'm just going through and booting into my BIOS and picking which one I want. And this is one of the advantages of using Alexander's script, is if we boot into our BIOS, we can switch between SteamOS and Windows. And Windows has its own EFI partition. You know, whenever Windows installs updates and messes up your SteamOS installation, that's typically happening because it's clobbering the SteamOS bootloader in the EFI partition. And so now we can actually just switch between Windows and SteamOS bootloaders here to pick which system we want, and they each have their own reserved EFI partition. And so this is going to actually reduce a lot of the chances that one OS can get an update and destroy the other OS's files. And so here we are, we're in Windows, and I can use my fingerprint to log in here. We're back in Windows, and if I want to go back into SteamOS, I would just shut down here. And now we will boot back into our BIOS and make sure to pick SteamOS as the first boot option. And I'm finding this to be much safer and more stable than using the refn manager, at least in this setup. If you're using my old dual boot guide, don't worry, you can keep using it the same way and you'll be alright. But I don't recommend using the refn manager unless you're an advanced user and you're able to manage it. By all means, go ahead and do it. But I don't recommend that for a vast majority of our users who want just a headache-free, fun gaming session. Don't even mess with refn in this setup where Windows is installed first. And here we are, we're back in SteamOS. I know that everybody's going to put this guide to great use. Hit me up in the comments section and let me know how it's working out for you. And don't forget to hit that like button, hype the video, and subscribe. That way you get that notification so you don't miss out on all the amazing toys and gaming tips we've got coming down the pipeline.